into my canvas, but this time it will size it so that it will fit almost exactly the same selection as the selection that I made. Okay, I hit return here. And so this is useful because obviously not, when you bring photos into your canvas, you always want it to be a certain shape and size. And so this is very useful to specify that. Okay. And again, you see that it also names the layer the same as the image file name. Okay. So this is the basic function. If you have no selection and you import an image in, it will just import the image in as its raw size. If you use the marquee to make an area selection, it will import the image in and automatically size it to be exactly the same size as the marquee selection area that you made. Okay. Next, I'm going to erase this, delete this layer. Now, let me talk about multiple images. So this place image action will work not just with a single photo, but it can work with multiple photos. So let's say I want to bring in 3 photos in a row. So what I do is I use the marquee and I just select a long rectangular area. Let's say I want the 3 photos to occupy this marquee selection, all 3 in a row. Okay, so I make that selection. I go back to Bridge and I go, okay, let's see, I want this image, I want this image, and I want this image. Okay, so I have 3 images selected. I'm going to go back into Photoshop. I'm just going to run the place image script again. Okay, and again, without adjusting for anything, if I hit the bridge now, it will bring in the 3 photos one at a time. And so I'm going to click that. It'll load the first image in, and you can see it requires some user intervention when it loads up the photo. It gives you the transform control tools so that you can actually change the size. We're not going to transform anything right now, so I'm just going to hit enter, and it's going to take that space, bring the photo in, hit enter again, then it will take the next space. I hit enter, bring the photo in. Now you notice how when I have the control tools, I can actually shift the photos up and down to make it fit better, and hit enter, and then it'll go to the next photo, and that's the last one. So at the end of this, you can see that it has placed the 3 photos that we selected in exactly the same space as the marquee selection that we originally made. Okay, now one thing you may wonder is the spacing between the photos. That can be adjusted. That was one of the options in the dialog box when we first ran the place image dialog box. So it talks a little bit about it in the documentation. So by default, the spacing was set to 3 units. You can always adjust that to your liking or depending on the design style that you're doing. Okay. So this works great. You have 3 photos and it equally spaced them out and placed them in the exact same area. Now the next thing you may be wondering is, well, what if I want three photos, but they may not be 3 vertical photos? What if you have a horizontal photos that you want to occupy more space? So this can be easily done as well. So I'm going to erase these layers and redo this exercise using a horizontal image plus 2 vertical images. Okay, so I am going to make the same area selection using the marquee tool, and then next we go back to our bridge, and let's just say I'm going to select, here's a horizontal image, and I'm going to select 2 vertical images. Okay, actually let me select this horizontal and these 2 verticals. Okay, next, going back to Photoshop, we run the place image script again. Okay, and again, like I mentioned before, this is where you can change the spacing. Let's change this to 1. Okay, and let's hit bridge. Now we know that the first image we selected was a horizontal image, so by default it divides the space equally between amongst the number of images that you imported. So but by showing the control anchors, you can then now resize this to drag it longer and hit enter. And what it will do is it will expand that first selection area, and it will import the photo into that selection and hit enter. So next, you notice how now the next two image areas will have less space, so it will then automatically adjust the next two spaces to be smaller. So you just hit return here and then return again, and then again we can adjust this and we're done. So now you notice a couple of things, right? By adjusting the transform handles along the way, you can change how the photo size is laid out in the design. And then you can also see here we have smaller spacing because we specified a smaller spacing number in the dialog box. So even with our most primitive action here, you have a lot of different options. And in this example, we showed you a horizontal layout. Well, you can do the exact same thing with a vertical layout. So very useful. Next, I'm going to talk about enlargements. You notice how in the samples that we showed you, all the photos were placed relatively at 100%, meaning they were cropped exactly the similar size as the original photo. But what if we wanted to zoom in on a portion of the photo when we bring it in? So there's an option for that when you call the place image script. So let's take a look at that. We're going to delete these layers we created. So let's say we want to place a single image here. We go back to Bridge and we're going to find an image. So let me find an image that's right here. Okay, so here we have an image. You can see the model here is a little bit smaller. She doesn't occupy the full frame, but when we bring this image into Photoshop, we want to zoom in towards her full face area instead of the whole frame. And so let's take a look how to do that. Switch back to Photoshop. We're going to run the place image action, and this time you notice that there's a scaling option here. We're going to click that, and by default it's 1. 1 means 100%. So what we're going to do is we're going to drag it until it increases to 1.31. That means it's going to enlarge the photo by 130% when it comes in. So after we're done, we click Bridge, and then it brings it in. And you can see how now the image that it brings in is a bit larger than the original marquee area. Whereas before, if we didn't change the scaling, it would squeeze it in completely to try to fit it at 100% frame. So now we can then adjust the scaling by making it smaller to fit the marquee selection. One thing that I have to emphasize is once the image comes in at a certain size, you never want to enlarge the photo too much, because when you do that, it will cause pixelation. If you bring a photo in and you say, oh shoot, this is too small, I really need it to be like this big, your best bet is to just bring in the photo again with a larger scaling size. You don't want to do this. You don't want to make it larger like this, because the second that you brought the photo in at a certain magnification, it is set at that magnification, and by manually enlarging it too much, you are basically causing a lot of pixelation to occur, and we will notice that when we check your files at 100%. So that is one rule of thumb that you should always remember. Once the photo comes in as a certain size, it is okay to make it smaller, but it is never okay to increase it much larger because of pixelation. Okay, so there are other different options that are discussed in the documentation. Let's take a look briefly. So we mentioned about placing image with marquee selection, placing multiple images. You can also place multiple images in the same spot. You notice how we always did a horizontal or vertical layout. There's a checkbox here that if you uncheck the distribute images, it will put all the images in the same spot. Play around with this. I'm not going to go into every single option here, but play around with this until you get comfortable, so that you get comfortable with knowing how to just do a basic place image onto your canvas. If you have any other questions after that, just send us an email and we'll be happy to help you out with that. Okay, and this ends this portion of the tutorial.